Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Manly Hall. This is the Secret Teachings of All Ages. We are up to chapter 14, I believe. This is the Hiramic Legend. But before we begin, I'm going to be reading this. We will be stopping to discuss it as we go along. But before you dive into this and probably get upset because I am absolutely going to step on some toes with this today, I have various resources linked up here. One of those will be an unconventional Bible study so that you can go back and understand exactly why I say the things that I do and what I am about to say. With that being said, we are going to dive into the Hiramic legend. Well, let's go. When Solomon, the beloved of God, builder of the everlasting house and grand master of the lodge of Jerusalem, ascended the throne of his father David, he consecrated his life to the erection of a temple to God and a palace for the kings of Israel. David's faithful friend Hiram, king of Tyre, hearing that a son of David sat upon the throne of Israel, sent messages of congratulations and offers of assistance to the new ruler. And here we're going to stop. I've gotten a lot of people show up to the crew here recently, and I appreciate every single one of you, but you need to understand that I have come to an understanding through this Bible study that David was an absolutely terrible man with absolutely no redeeming qualities whatsoever. He was a thug. He was a violent, violent person who threatened, killed, or destroyed whoever stood in his way. His taking of the reins of the kingship was not in any ways God sanctioned. It was pretty terrible how it went about, and he never once repented. I know that he has a lot of psalms attributed to him, and we did not do the psalms in here because we cannot necessarily attribute them where they go. But the story of David, we definitely did the story of David. And David was a terrible, terrible, terrible person, and his son Solomon was not much better. His ascent to the throne was quite bloody and terrible, and he destroyed all of his family. He killed everyone and had no qualms about it. Now, you can make whatever apologies that you wish for that, but I do not, in any way, shape, or form, make apologies for those people. The legends around Solomon are about him controlling demons and summoning and doing things with a little ring that has a certain seal upon it. I am a big one for tools. We talk about tools all the time. I have tools back here on the shelf behind me. I have tools right here next to me that I use for various purposes. And those tools don't have any power by themselves. And it is your intentionality behind them tools. But if you are dealing and consorting with controlling any type of entity, you are absolutely doing it wrong. If you are drawing shapes upon the ground and summoning entities, you are doing it wrong. If you are in any way, shape, or form trying to manifest and control the actions of any entity, good or bad, you are doing things wrong. And Solomon absolutely was doing things wrong. We went through step by step in the Bible how exactly he was not a good person, how exactly his dad was not a good person, how exactly the entire lineage was really, really bad. Everything that happened in that book was pretty terrible, and if you read it without them glasses, boy, it makes a big difference. And so, this all gets taken with a grain of salt, right? The story that was written is not necessarily the story as it played out, and the way that people interpret it are not exactly the way that it should be interpreted. Now, the alliance between Hiram in Tyre and Solomon in Israel, Jerusalem, that was probably a thing. We have records that this exchange happened, but some people read way too much into that, and we will get into that as we go further along. In his History of the Jews, Josephus mentions that copies of the letters passing between the two kings were then to be seen both at Jerusalem and at Tyre. Despite Hiram's lack of appreciation for the 20 cities of Galilee which Solomon presented to him upon the completion of the temple, the two monarchs remained the best of friends. Both were famous for their wit and wisdom, and when they exchanged letters, each devising puzzling questions to test the mental ingenuity of the other, Solomon made an agreement with Hiram of Tyre, promising vast amounts of barley, wheat, corn, wine, and oil as wages for the masons and carpenters from Tyre, who were to assist the Jews in the erection of the temple. Hiram also supplied cedars and other fine trees, which were made into rafts and floated down the sea to Joppa, whence they were taken inland by Solomon's workmen to the temple site. Because of his great love for Solomon, Hiram of Tyre also sent the grand master of the Dionysic architects, Hiram Abif, a widow's son, who had no equal among the craftsmen of the earth. Hiram is described as being a Tyrian by birth, but of Israeli descent, and a second Bezaleel, honored by his king with the title of Father. The Freemason's Pocket Companion, published in 1771, describes Hiram as the most cunning, skillful, and curious workman that ever lived, whose abilities were not confined to building alone, but extended to all kinds of work, whether in gold, silver, brass, or iron, whether in linen, tapestry, or embroidery, whether considered as an architect, statuary, there's no extra T in that bit, founder, or designer, separately or together. He equally excelled. From his designs and under his direction, all the rich and splendid furniture of the temple and its several appendages were begun, carried on, and finished. Solomon appointed him, in his absence, to fill the chair as deputy grand master, and in his presence senior grand warden, master of work, and general overseer of all artists, as well as those whom David had formerly procured from Tyre and Sidon. As those Hiram would now send, modern Masonic writers differ as to the accuracy of the last sentence. Let's stop here for just a minute and understand fully and completely one simple thing. We do not have any records whatsoever, as far as I am able to determine, and you can let me know down below if I am wrong, but we have zero documents whatsoever that lists Solomon as a fucking Freemason. Now, I don't hold anything against your clubs, right? If you're a Freemason, do your thing. Associate with who you want to. I don't hold, as many people do, with the Masons are evil thing. But this shit right here does not help your case whatsoever. In your recruitment, you do not have a record from the time of Solomon that says that Solomon was the grand master of the fucking lodge. And it's one of those things that casts doubt upon the whole thing, right? It is one of those things that makes the shadow unshakable, right? That this being included in the secret ages of all times casts shadow upon everything written in here. Part of what I am doing here is trying to discern, right? I talk all the time about how I do have a gift of discernment. I can spot bullshit. It's one of my things. I have pattern recognition in an incredible amount. I can spot the pattern so fast. Lying forms a pattern. This is not the first lie that we have seen about the Masons. We don't have anything connecting them to old Egypt at all. We have legends, we have myths, but we don't have any actual paperwork of anything even resembling this particular organization in the time of building anything in Egypt. We do not have it in the time of building anything in Israel. We do not have it in the time of building anything in Babylon. We do not have it in the time of building anything in Assyria. We do not have any records of the Masons prior to the 1700s. That's not that long ago, right? It's, 400 years now? 300 something? I don't know. It's not that long ago. It's really not. In the grand scope of things, it is nowhere near the 25 to 3,000 years that this would have been. That is an order of magnitude more that we do not have the records, but you claim it. You put it in there as if it is true. It is not, right? We don't have anything to back this up. Nothing to back this up other than the Masons said that this is what the Masons do. I have the same problem with the Bible as this, right? I do not believe that the Jews were a chosen people. You can not follow me if you don't agree with that. I have taken the time to go through and show why I believe that. I believe that God made everybody, every single person, and some person can be a chosen person. Moses might have been a chosen person, but the people aren't. There's not the American people are chosen, or the Greek people are chosen, or the Jewish people are chosen. That is not a real thing. God rewards the faithful. And if the people had been faithful, then they would have been rewarded for being faithful. But they were not his chosen people. Other people are just as loved by God in other places. But what happened was they needed to form a religion in order to pull themselves up from those around them. And we talk in the Bible study about how that's not a bad thing. But that does not mean that they got things correct. Every single blood sacrifice was wrong. Every single one of them. Every single time that anybody sacrificed blood for sin, they did it wrong. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I have read in the fucking book, every single one of them was wrong. But they tried, right? That's what the point was to put a penalty upon whatever your sin was. That was the point of the sacrifice, was you messed up and you need to feel that financially, so give me a goat. That's what the point of the sacrifice was. It was never that God required the goat to die for you to be forgiven from your sin. And that is the basis of that religion. So the religion can be correct. If your religion is based upon blood sacrifice, it is not a good one. And even if it has been changed, which is highly in doubt, by someone else, by doing a sacrifice, which possibly was the one blood sacrifice ever that was properly aligned, because he was trying to do away with the blood sacrifice, and then we built a whole religion about his blood sacrifice. But other than that one particular time, every single time you have killed an animal in the name of God, you have done it wrong. It is the same fundamental flaw that is the problem here. This is why I cannot associate with Masonry, right? I thought about it, I really did, but I can't be sworn to secrecy. It is one of my peccadillos. And I can't be a part of something where people blatantly lie. Although an immense amount of labor was involved in its construction, Solomon's Temple, in the words of George Oliver, was only a small building and very inferior in point of size to some of our churches. The number of buildings contiguous to it and the vast treasure of gold and precious stones used in its construction concentrated a great amount of wealth within the temple area. In the midst of the temple stood the Holy of Holies, sometimes called the Oracle. It was an exact cube, each dimension being 20 cubits, and exemplified the influence of Egyptian symbolism. The buildings of the temple group were ornamented with 1,453 columns of Parian marble, magnificently sculptured, and 2,906 pilasters, decorated with capitals. That's supposed to be pillars. There was a broad porch facing the east, and the Sanctum Sanctorum was upon the west. According to tradition, the various buildings and courtyards could hold, in all, 300,000 persons. Both the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies were entirely lined with solid gold plates encrusted with jewels, because that is a judicious use of monetary value. King Solomon began the building of the temple in the 4th year of his reign, on what would be, according to modern calculations, the 21st day of April, and finished it in the 11th year of his reign on the 23rd day of October. The temple was begun in the 480th year after the children of Israel had passed the Red Sea. Part of the labor of construction included the building of an artificial foundation on the brow of Mount Moriah. The stones for the temple were hoisted from quarries directly beneath Mount Moriah and were trued before being brought to the surface. The brass and golden ornaments for the temple were cast in molds in the clay ground between Succoth and Zeradatha, and the wooden parts were all finished before they reached the temple site. The building was put together, consequently, without sound and without instruments. all its parts fitting exactly without the hammer of contention, the axe of division, or any tool of mischief. And I do not believe that. I absolutely do not believe that. I have been a craftsman, right? I started building houses when I was 13 years old, 12 or 13. Anyway, I worked every summer and every weekend. I was running my own crew by the time I was 15 years old. I could do the things. I strive for perfection in all that I do. I cannot believe that there was no sound or no tools in the laying of these blocks. I just can't believe that. I can't believe that there was no effort expended. I can't believe that there was no necessary modifications to all of the stones that would have gone into this. Every single piece fit exactly perfectly. Fuck you. There's no way. It's not possible. God himself would have to cut the stones, and if he was going to do that, he could raise it up whole piece out of the ground. That's not what happened. This again is an exaggeration to prove, well, this was God's will. We did it exactly. No, you're a liar. I know, I step on toes. I don't apologize for it. I'm sorry. Anderson's much discussed Constitutions of the Freemasons, published in London in 1723, reprinted by Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia in 1734, thus describes the division of the laborers engaged in the building of the everlasting house. But Dagon's temple, the finest structures of Tyre and Sidon, could not be compared with the eternal God's temple at Jerusalem. So, hang tight. So what you're telling me is that you took the guy who built these and he did better for someone else than he did for his own place. Okay? Okay. There were employed about it no less than 3,600 princes or master masons to conduct the work according to Solomon's directions, with 80,000 hewers of stone in the mountain, or fellow craftsmen, and 70,000 laborers. In all, 153,600 besides the levy under Adoniram to work on the mountains of Lebanon by turns, with the Sidonians, vis-a-vis 30,000, being in all 183,600. Daniel Sickles gives 3,300 overseers instead of 3,600, and lists the three Grand Masters separately. The same author estimates the cost of the temple at nearly 4,000 millions of dollars. Masonic legend of the building of Solomon's temple does not in every particular parallel the scriptural version, particularly in those portions relating to Hiram Abiff. According to the biblical account, this master workman returned to his own country. In the Masonic allegory, he is foully murdered. On this point, A.E. Waite, in his New Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, makes the following explanatory comment. The legend of the master builder is the great allegory of Masonry. It happens that his figurative story is grounded on the fact that of a personality mentioned in Holy Scripture. But this historical background is of the accidents and not the essence. The significance is in the allegory and not in any point of history which may lie behind it. It's okay that we founded it upon a lie. Hiram, as master of the builders, divided his workmen into three groups, which were termed entered apprentices, fellow craftsmen, and master masons. To each division he gave certain passwords and signs by which their respective excellence could be quickly determined. Again, this is completely unsubstantiated. While all were classified according to the merits, some were dissatisfied, for they desired a more exalted position than they were capable of filling. At last, three fellow craftsmen, more daring than their companions, determined to force Hiram to reveal to them the password of the master's degree. Knowing that Hiram always went into the unfinished sanctum sanctorum at high noon to pray, these ruffians, whose names were Jabula, Jabuelo, and Jabulum, lay in wait for him, one at each of the main gates of the temple. about to leave the temple by the south gate, was suddenly confronted by Jabella, armed with 24-inch gauge. Upon Hiram's refusal to reveal the master's word, the ruffian struck him in the throat with the rule and wounded the master, then hastened to the west gate, where Jabella, armed with a square, awaited him and made a similar demand. Again, Hiram was silent, and the second assassin struck him on the breast with the square, and Hiram thereupon staggered to the east gate, only to be met there by Jebulun, armed with a maul. And when Hiram refused him the master's word, Jebulun struck the master between the eyes with the mallet, and Hiram fell dead. The body of Hiram was buried by the murderers on the brow of Mount Moriah, and a spring of acacia placed upon the grave. The murderers then sought to escape punishment for their crime by embarking for Ethiopia, but the port was closed. All three were finally captured, and after admitting their guilt were duly executed. Parties of three were then sent out by King Solomon, and one of these groups discovered the newly made grave marked by an evergreen sprig. After the injured apprentices and fellow craftsmen had failed to resurrect their master from the dead, he was finally raised by the master mason with the strong grip of a lion's paws. To the uninitiated builder, the name of Hiram Abiff signifies my father, the universal spirit, one in essence, three in aspect. Thus, the murdered master is a type of the cosmic martyr, the crucified spirit of good, the dying God, whose mystery is celebrated throughout the world. Among the manuscripts of Dr. Sigismund Bastrom, the initiated Rosicrucian, appears the following extract from von Welling concerning the true philosophic nature of the Masonic Hiram. We're going to go back and check out this illustration here. The Masonic apron. Oh boy, look at that. Centered upon death. Isn't that wonderful? We have the various implements, right? This is a plumb. Like that is a square. But this is a plumb bob. We have a dagger and a chisel with a key, possibly. There's the pillars with the star, and there's the bees and the pyramids. There's the mallet. There's the obelisk. Like, there's a lot of symbology in here. There's 6 and there's 3. And what we got? 3, 6, 9. Like, there's a lot in here. Let's see what it has to say about it. From an early hand-painted Masonic apron. While the mystic symbolism of Freemasonry decrees that the apron shall be a simple square of white lambskin with appropriate flap, Masonic aprons are frequently decorated with curious and impressive figures. When silk, cotton, or linen is worn, writes Albert Pike, the symbolism is lost. Nor is one clothed who blots, defaces, and desecrates the white surface with ornamentation, figuring, or colors of any kind. To Mars, the ancient plane of cosmic energy, the Atlantean and Chaldean stargazers assigned Aries as a diurnal throne and Scorpio as a nocturnal throne. Those not raised to spiritual life by initiation are described as dead from the sting of a scorpion, for they wander in the night side of divine power. Through the mystery of the Paschal Lamb or the attainment of the Golden Fleece, these souls are raised in the constructive day power of Mars in Aries, the symbol of the Creator. When worn over the area related to the animal passions, the pure lambskin signifies the regeneration of the procreative forces and their consecration to the service of the deity. The size of the apron, exclusive of the flap, makes it the symbol of salvation, for the mysteries declare that it must consist of 144 square inches. The apron, shown above, contains a wealth of symbolism: the beehive, emblematic of the Masonic Lodge itself, the trowel, the mallet, and the trestle board, the rough and true ashlars, the pyramids and hills of Lebanon, the pillars, the temple, the checkerboard floor, and the blazing star and tools of the craft. The center of the apron is occupied by the compass and square, representative of the macrocosm and the microcosm, and the alternately black and white serpent of astral light. Below is an acacia branch with 7 sprigs, signifying the life centers of the superior and the inferior man. 7. The skull and crossbones are a continual reminder that the spiritual nature attains liberation only after the philosophical death of man's sensuous personality. Okay, so now we're going to do concerning the true philosophic nature of the Masonic Hiram. The original word, Hiram, is a radical word consisting of 3 consonants, Cheth, Resh, and Mem. Cheth signifies Shema, the sun's light, i.e., the universal, invisible, cold fire of nature, attracted by the sun, manifested into light, and sent down to us in every planetary body belonging to the solar system. Resh signifies Ruach, i.e., spirit, air, wind, as being the vehicle which conveys and collects the light into a numberless foci, wherein the solar rays of light are agitated by a circular motion and manifested in heat and burning fire. Mem signifies Majim, water, humidity, but rather the mother of water, radical humidity, or a particular kind of condensed air. These 3 constitute the universal agent or fire of nature in one word, Hiram, not Hiram. Albert Pike mentioned several forms of the name Hiram, Kiram, Kerm, and Karom, the latter ending in the sacred Hindu Manu symbol, Om, which may also be extracted from the names of the 3 murderers. Pike further relates the 3 ruffians to a triad of stars in the constellation of Libra, and also calls attention to the fact that the Chaldean god Baal, metamorphosed into a demon by the Jews, appears in the name of each of the murderers, Jubela, Jubelo, and Jubelum. Again, these are names that are pulled whole cloth out of nothing, so to interpret the Hiramic legend requires familiarity with both the Pythagorean and Kabbalistic systems of numbers and letters, and also the philosophic and astronomic cycles of the Egyptians, Chaldeans, and Brahmins. For example, consider the number 33. The first Temple of Solomon stood for 33 years in its pristine splendor. At the end of that time, it was pillaged by the Egyptian king Shishak, and finally, 588 BC, it was completely destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the people of Jerusalem were led into captivity to Babylon. See General History of Freemasonry by Robert McCoy. Also, King David ruled for 33 years in Jerusalem. The Masonic order is divided into 33 symbolic degrees. There are 33 segments in the human spinal column, and Jesus was crucified in the 33rd year of his life. Again, unfounded. I know that that's the legend, but it's not necessarily founded in anything. The efforts made to discover the origin of the Hiramic legend show that while the legend in its present form is comparatively modern, its underlying principles run back to remotest antiquity. It is generally admitted by modern Masonic scholars that the story of the martyred Hiram is based upon the Egyptian rites of Osiris, whose death and resurrection figuratively portrayed the spiritual death of man and his regeneration through initiation into the mysteries. Hiram is also identified with Hermes through the inscription on the emerald table. From these associations, it is evident that Hiram is to be considered as a prototype of humanity. In fact, he is Plato's archetype of man. As Adam, after the fall, symbolizes the idea of human degeneration, so Hiram, through his resurrection, symbolizes the idea of human regeneration. On the 19th day of March, 1314, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, was burned on a pyre erected upon that point of the islet of the Seine at Paris, where afterwards was erected the statue of King Henry IV. See The Indian Religions by Hargrave Jennings. It is mentioned as a tradition in some of the accounts of the burning, writes Jennings, that Molay, ere he expired, summoned Clement, the Pope, who had pronounced the bull of abolition against the order and had condemned the Grand Master to the flames, to appear within 40 days before the Supreme Eternal Judge, and Philip, the king, to the same awful tribunal within the space of a year. Both predictions were fulfilled. The close relationship between Freemasonry and the original Knights Templar has caused the story of Hiram to be linked with the martyrdom of Jacques du Molay. According to this interpretation, the three ruffians who cruelly slew their master at the gates of the temple because he refused to reveal the secrets of his order represent the Pope, the King, and the executioners. De Molay died maintaining his innocence and refusing to disclose the philosophical and magical arcana of the Templars. Legends are great. They are a great way to pass on information. Some of them may even be true, but again, we don't have the confirmation of these things. Right? There may be this story, and it may even be true that he said these things, but linking this to Masonry is baseless. There is several hundred years between the end of the Templars and the beginning of the Masons, and it is possible, entirely possible, that they went underground. But there still is 2,000 years separating the Templars from Hiram. To those who have sought to identify Hiram with the murdered King Charles I, conceive the Hiramic legend to have been invented for that purpose by Elias Ashmole, a mystical philosopher who was probably a member of the Rosicrucian fraternity. Charles was dethroned in 1647 and died on the block in 1649, leaving the Royalist party leaderless. An attempt has been made to relate the term the Sons of the Widow, an appellation frequently applied to members of the Masonic order, to this incident in English history, for by the murder of her king, England becomes a widow, and all Englishmen widows' sons. To the mystic Christian Mason, Hiram represents the Christ. It better not. Who in 3 degrees, raised the temple of his body from the earthly sepulchre. His 3 murderers were Caesar's agents, the state, the Sanhedrin, the church, and the incited populace, the mob. Thus considered, Hiram becomes the higher nature of man, and the murderers are ignorance, superstition, and fear. The indwelling Christ can give expressions to himself in this world only through man's thoughts, feelings, and actions. Right thinking, right feeling, and right action. These are the 3 gates through which the Christ power passes into the material world, there to labor in the erection of the temple of universal brotherhood. Ignorance, superstition, and fear are 3 ruffians, through whose agencies the spirit of good is murdered, and a false kingdom, controlled by wrong thinking, wrong feelings, and wrong action, established in its stead. In the material universe, evil appears ever victorious. In this sense, writes Daniel Sickles, the myth of the Tyrian is perpetually repeated in the history of human affairs. Orpheus was murdered and his body thrown into the Hebrus. Socrates was made to drink the hemlock, and in all ages we have seen evil temporarily triumphant, and virtue and truth calumniated, persecuted, crucified, and slain. But eternal justice marches surely and swiftly through the world. The Typhons, the children of darkness, the plotters of crime, all the infinitely varied forms of evil are swept into oblivion, and truth and virtue, for a time laid low, come forth clothed with diviner majesty and crowned with everlasting glory. See General Lyman Raison. If, as there is ample reason to suspect, the modern Freemasonic order was profoundly influenced by, if not an actual outgrowth of, Francis Bacon's secret society, its symbolism is undoubtedly permeated with Bacon's 2 great ideals, universal education and universal democracy. The deadly enemies of universal education are ignorance, superstition, and fear, by which the human soul is held in bondage to the lowest part of his own constitution. The errant enemies of universal democracy have ever been the crown, the tiara, and the torch. And we're going to pause right here because there is no more effective form of tyranny than the democracy. If you have a monarch, at least you have a target to resist. Democracy is mob rule, and people are, by and large, pretty fucking terrible. It is only through concerted efforts that we overcome that particular fact. And if we allow democracy, we have a problem. Now, we use democratic systems in our representative republic here in the United States. We are not in any way a democracy. Everyone who says that, everyone who insinuates that, everyone who tells you that we are, is hoping to keep you in bondage. A representative government that we have in the form of a republic takes into account your free will and your ability to own property and do whatever you want. Democracy does not do that. People can decide that your stuff is their stuff and they will take it. That is the natural outgrowth of democracy, and that is why we do not have it. Thus, Hiram symbolizes the ideal state of spiritual, intellectual, and physical emancipation which has ever been sacrificed upon the altar of human selfishness. Hiram is the beautifier of the eternal house. Modern utilitarianism, however, sacrifices the beautiful for the practical, in the same breath declaring the obvious lie that selfishness, hatred, and discord are practical. Dr. Orville Ward Owen found a considerable part of the 32 degrees of Freemasonic ritualism hidden in the text of the first Shakespeare folio. Masonic emblems are to be observed also upon the title pages of nearly every book published by Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon considered himself as a living sacrifice upon the altar of human need. He was obviously cut down in the midst of his labors, and no student of his New Atlantis can fail to recognize the Masonic symbolism contained therein. According to the observations of Joseph Fort Newton, the Temple of Solomon, described by Bacon in that utopian romance, was not a house at all, but the name of an ideal state. Is it not true that the Temple of Freemasonry is also emblematic of a condition of society? While, as before stated, the principles of the Hiramic legend are of the greatest antiquity, it is not impossible that its present form may be based upon incidents in the life of Lord Bacon, who passed through the philosophic death and was raised in Germany. We're going to fall back and check out the emblematic hand of the mysteries. A hand covered with the numerous symbols was extended from the neophytes when they entered into the Temple of Wisdom. An understanding of the embossed upon the surface of the hand brought with it a divine power and regeneration. Therefore, by means of these symbolic hands, the candidate was said to be raised from the dead. There you go, worshipping tools again. In an old manuscript appears the statement that the Freemasonic order was formed by alchemists and hermetic philosophers, who had banded themselves together to protect their secrets against the infamous methods used by avaricious persons to wring from them the secret of gold making. The fact that the Hiramic legend contains an alchemical formula gives credence to this story. Thus, the building of Solomon's Temple represents the consummation of the magnum opus, which cannot be realized without the assistance of Hiram, the universal agent. The Masonic mysteries teach the initiate how to prepare within his own soul a miraculous powder of projection, by which it is possible for him to transmute the base lump of human ignorance, perversion, and discord into an ingot of spiritual and philosophic gold. I am doing that without the intervention of any particular person. I have various playlists that you can go and check out. They are linked in the top corner over there and in the box down below. Sufficient similarity exists between the Masonic Chiram and the Kundalini of Hindu mysticism to warrant the assumption that Chiram may be considered a symbol, also, of the spirit fire moving through the sixth ventricle of the spinal column. The exact science of human regeneration is the lost key of Masonry, for when the spirit fire is lifted up through the 33 degrees or segments of the spinal column and enters into the domed chamber of the human skull, it finally passes into the pituitary body, Isis, where it invokes Ra, the pineal gland, and demands the sacred name. Operative Masonry, in the fullest meaning of that term, signifies the process by which the eye of Horus is opened. I have before, and I will again talk to you about the direction of this particular energy. I do not call it Kundalini. It does not flow in only one direction, and it is not defined entirely here. It does pass through the spinal column, but it doesn't pass through the bones. That's the thing. You have a column of fluid that surrounds your spinal column. It protects it. It is like a shock absorber. Now, me personally, mine is a little bit narrower. It's called spinal stenosis. But regardless, you can move your will through that fluid. It goes to the sacral and the third eye. But also, those fluids extend down into the base, into the pelvic area. There are various little channels that resemble rivers or inlets. And there's the same thing at the top in the crown. You receive this energy both from the bottom and from the top. You have control on the directions of it, and you can move it how you need to, up and down, depending upon the need that is particular. The upper needs of the spiritual nature are from the throat up, and the base needs of the lower nature are from the stomach down, and then there's one right here in the middle that feeds the one out here, and all of these we have talked about before and we'll talk about again. But this is not quite right. Once again, right, that is what we are doing here. Right? That is the point of going through this, is so that we can talk about it. You do need to take that energy, and you need to run it through your pineal gland, which we talked about is if you draw a line between here and there, and a line between here and there, that's where it's at. And if you take your energy and you pull it up into your throat and you bring it back to the base of your skull back here and you shove it through that pineal gland, you can get rid of the calcification that is there. There is no special techniques other than that. It is something that you have to work on, and it will happen eventually. That is definitely part of this process, but it is not the end of it. This is only half of what you need to do. You have to pull in the energizing energy and the grounding energy, and this is all grounding energy. All the references to the Kundalini pulling from the base all the way up, that is a grounding energy, but it is only half of the equation, and that is why their manifestations don't work. That is why the things that they attempt to do not happen. Because they are only using half of the equation, and they don't even know that. E.A. Wallace Budge has noted in some of the papyri illustrating the entrance of the souls of the dead into the judgment hall of Osiris, the deceased person has a pine cone attached to the crown of his head. The Greek mystics also carried the symbolic staff, the upper end being the form of a pine cone, which was called the thyrsus of Bacchus. In the human brain there is a tiny gland, called the pineal body, which is the sacred eye of the ancients, and corresponds to the third eye of the Cyclops. Little is known concerning the function of this pineal body, which Descartes suggests, more wisely than he knew, might be the abode of the spirit of man. Close. As its name signifies, the pineal gland is the sacred pine cone in man, the eye single, which cannot be opened until Hiram, the spirit fire, is raised through the secret seals, which are called the 7 churches in Asia. And again, this is almost correct. But if you are bringing it to the eye, then you're only moving to 6, not 7. And if you are only bringing it to the eye, you are not fully activating the top. If you are not pulling it from the top and combining the energy, then you are doing nothing. Right? It's Boaz and Jachin. There are 2 elements at play here. It is not just the one. You are only using Boaz. You are not using Jachin. It doesn't, like, your own doctrine, your own stuff tells you, and you're not doing it. It's amazing to me. Like, it really is. There is an Oriental painting which shows 3 sunbursts. One sunburst covers the head, in the midst of which sits Brahma with 4 heads, his body a mysterious dark color. The second sunburst, which covers the heart, solar plexus, and upper abdominal region, shows Vishnu sitting in the blossom of the lotus on a couch formed of the coils of the serpent of cosmic motion, its 7 hooded head forming a canopy over the god. The third sunburst is over the generative system, in midst of which sits Shiva, his body a grayish white, and the Ganges River flowing out of the crown of his head. This painting was the work of a Hindu mystic who spent many years subtly concealing the great philosophical principles within these figures. The Christian legends could be related also to the human body by the same method as the Oriental, for the arcane meanings hidden in the teachings of both schools are identical. We have talked about, I did not transfer that, my bad. We have talked about that, right? That is the Trinity in part, and that is the 3 different parts of you. Right? We just talked about that. You have the throat, the third eye, and the crown, or the upper. You have the base, the sacral, and the solar plexus, or the lower, and you have the heart right in the middle. That is the 3 zones being described right here. As applied to masonry, the 3 sunbursts represent the gates of the temple at which Hiram was struck, there being no gate in the north because the sun never shines from the northern angle of the heavens. The north is the symbol of the physical because of its relation to ice, crystallized water, and to body, crystallized spirit. In man, the light shines towards the north, but never from it, because the body has no light of its own, but shines with the reflected glory of the divine life particles concealed within physical substance. For this reason, the moon is accepted as the symbol of man's physical nature. Hiram is the mysterious, fiery, airy water which must be raised through the 3 grand centers, symbolized by the ladder with 3 rungs, and the sunburst flowers mentioned in the description of the Hindu painting. It must also pass upwards by means of a ladder of 7 rungs, the 7 plexuses proximate to the spine. The 9 segments of the sacrum and coccyx are pierced by 10 foramina, through which pass the roots of the tree of life. 9 is the sacred number of man, and in the symbolism of the sacrum and coccyx, a great mystery is concealed. That part of the body, from the kidneys downward, was termed by the early Kabbalists as the land of Egypt, into which the children of Israel were taken during the captivity. Out of Egypt, Moses, the illuminated mind, as his name implies, led the tribes of Israel, the 12 faculties, by raising the brazen serpent in the wilderness upon the symbol of the Tau cross. Not only Hiram, but the god-men of nearly every pagan mystery ritual are personifications of the spirit fire in the human spinal cord. Side note, the serpent on the staff that Moses gave to the Israelites to worship, and they did for a couple of thousand years, is an interesting little rabbit hole to go down all by itself. They did, indeed, worship a snake on a stick. You should check that out. The astronomical aspect of the Hiramic legend must not be overlooked. The tragedy of Hiram is enacted annually by the sun during its passage through the signs of the zodiac. From the journey of the sun through the 12 signs, writes Albert Pike, come the legend of the 12 labors of Hercules, and the incarnations of Vishnu and Buddha. Hence came the legend of the murder of Kurum, representative of the sun, by the 3 fellow crafts, symbols of the winter signs Capricornus, Aquarius, and Pisces, who assailed him at the 3 gates of heaven and slew him at the winter solstice. Hence the search for him by the 9 fellow crafts and the other 9 signs, his finding, burial, and resurrection. See Morals and Dogma. Other authors consider Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius as the 3 murderers of the sun, inasmuch as Iris was murdered by Typhon, to whom were assigned the 30 degrees of the constellation of Scorpio. In the Christian mysteries also, Judas signifies the scorpion, and the 30 pieces of silver for which he betrayed his Lord represent the number of degrees in that sign. Having been struck by Libra, the state, Scorpio, the church, and Sagittarius, the mob, the sun, Hiram, is secretly home through the darkness by the signs of Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and buried over the brow of a hill, the vernal equinox. Capricorn has for its symbol an old man with a scythe in his hand. This is Father Time, a wayfarer, who is symbolized in Masonry as straightening out the ringlets of the young girl's hair. If the weeping Virgin be considered a symbol of Virgo, and Father Time with the scythe a symbol of Capricorn, then the interval of 90 degrees between these two signs will be found to correspond to that occupied by the three murderers. Esoterically, the urn containing the ashes of Hiram represents the human heart. Saturn, the old man who lives at the North Pole and brings with him to the children of men a sprig of evergreen, the Christmas tree, is familiar to the little folks under the name Santa Claus, for he brings each winter the gifts of a new year. The martyred sun is discovered by Aries, a fellow craftsman, and at the vernal equinox the process of raising him begins. This is finally accomplished by the Lion of Judah, who in ancient times occupied the position of the keystone of the royal ark of heaven. This procession of the equinoxes causes various signs to play the role of murderers of the sun during the different ages of the world. But the principle involved remains unchanged. Such is the cosmic story of Hiram, the universal benefactor, the fiery architect of the divine house who carries with him to the grave that lost word which, when spoken, raises all life to power and glory. According to Christian mysticism, when the lost word is found, it is discovered in a stable, surrounded by beasts and marked by a star. After the sun leaves Leo, writes Robert Hewitt Brown, the days begin to grow unequivocally shorter as the sun declines toward the autumnal equinox. To be again slain by the 3 autumnal months, lie dead through the 3 winter ones, and be raised again by the 3 vernal ones. Each year the great tragedy is repeated, and the glorious resurrection takes place. See stellar theology and Masonic astronomy. Hiram is termed dead because in the average individual, the cosmic creative forces are limited in their manifestation to purely physical and correspondingly materialistic expression. Obsessed by his belief in the reality and permanence of the physical existence, man does not correlate the material universe with a blank north wall of the temple. As the solar light symbolically is said to die as it approaches the winter solstice, so the physical world may be termed the winter solstice of the spirit. Reaching the winter solstice, the sun, apparently, stands still for 3 days, and then, rolling away the stone of winter, begins its triumphal march north, towards the summer solstice. The condition of ignorance may not be likened to the winter solstice of philosophy. Spiritual understanding to the summer solstice. From this point of view, initiation into the mysteries becomes the vernal equinox of the spirit, at which time the Hiram in man crosses from the realm of mortality into that of eternal life. The autumnal equinox is analogous to the mythological fall of man, at which time the human spirit descended into the realm of Hades by being immersed in the illusion of terrestrial existence. And before we get on to Diana of Ephesus here, I'm going to make a note about this word that they keep talking about. It may or may not be relevant, but I have been given a word. It was given to me at my initiation into the order of Melchizedek. It was given to me by someone, probably God, right? That's how I look at it, but you probably don't look at it because it's not conventional. But I do have a word. It is a word of confirmation that was given to me upon initiation into the mysteries that I am talking about here. I was directly initiated into the things that I'm talking about. I am not just pulling them out of my ass. They work off of half, right? It tells you right here the absolute outpouring of that. The average individual, the cosmic creative forces are limited in their manifestation to the purely physical and correspondingly materialistic expression. That's because you don't know the word, true, but it is because you are only using one half of the equation. We were just talking about that in the preceding paragraphs. You only use half, so you only get half. What do you expect to happen if you only put in half, you only get out half? You can't use only half and expect the full result. There's a reason why you don't have the word. Now, Diana of Ephesus. That is an interesting picture. There's a lot of things going on in that. Crowned with a triple tower-like tiara, and her form adorned with symbolic creatures representative of her spiritual powers, Diana stood for the source of that imperishable doctrine, which, flowing from the bosom of the great Multimania, is the spiritual food of those aspiring men and women who have consecrated their lives to the contemplation of reality. As the physical body of man receives its nutriment from the great Earth Mother, so the spiritual nature of man is fed from the never-failing fountains of truth, pouring outward from the invisible world. In an essay on the beautiful, Plotinus describes the refining effect of beauty upon the unfolding consciousness of man. Commissioned to decorate the everlasting house, Hiram of Biff is the entire embodiment of the beautifying principle. Beauty is essential to the natural unfoldment of the human soul. The mysteries held that man, at least, and in part at least, was the product of his environment. Therefore, they considered it imperative that every person be surrounded by objects which would evoke the highest and noblest sentiments. They proved that it was possible to produce beauty in life by surrounding life with beauty. They discovered that symmetrical bodies were built by souls continuously in the presence of symmetrical bodies, that noble thoughts were produced by minds surrounded by examples of mental nobility. Conversely, if a man were forced to look upon an ignoble or asymmetrical structure, it would arouse within him a sense of ignobility, which would provoke him to commit ignoble deeds. If an ill-proportioned building were erected in the midst of a city, there would be ill-proportioned children born in that community, and men and women gazing upon the asymmetrical structure would live inharmonious lives. Thoughtful men of antiquity realized that their great philosophers were the natural products of the aesthetic ideals of architecture, music, and art, established as the standards of the cultural systems of the time. The substitution of the discord of the fantastic for the harmony of the beautiful constitutes one of the great tragedies of every civilization. Not only were the savior gods of the ancient world beautiful, but each performed a ministry of beauty, seeking to effect man's regeneration by arousing within him the love of the beautiful. A renaissance of the golden age of fable can be made possible only by the elevation of beauty to its rightful dignity, as the all-pervading, idealizing quality in the religious, ethical, sociological, scientific, and political departments of life. The Dionysiac architects were consecrated to the raising of their master spirit, cosmic beauty, from the sepulchre of material ignorance and selfishness by erecting buildings which were such perfect exemplars of symmetry and majesty that they were actually magical formulae by which was evoked the spirit of the martyred beautifier entombed within a materialistic world. In the Masonic mysteries, the triune spirit of man, the light delta, is symbolized by the three Grand Masters of the Lodge of Jerusalem. As God is the pervading principle of three worlds, in each of which he manifests as an active principle, so the spirit of man, partaking in the nature of divinity, dwells upon three planes of being: the supreme, the superior, and the inferior spheres of Pythagoreans. At the gate of the inferior sphere, the underworld, or dwelling place of mortal creatures, stands the guardian of Hades, the three-headed dog Cerberus, who is analogous with the three murderers of the Hiramic legend. According to this symbolic interpretation of the triune spirit, Hiram is the third or incarnating part, the master builder, who through all the ages erects living temples of flesh and blood as shrines of the Most High. Hiram comes forth as a flower and is cut down. He dies at the gates of matter. He is buried in the elements of creation, but, like Thor, he swings his mighty hammer in the fields of space, sets the primordial atoms in motion, and establishes order out of chaos. As the potentiality of cosmic power within each human soul, Hiram lies waiting for man by the elaborate ritualism of life to transmute potentiality into divine potency. As the sense perceptions of the individual increase, however, man gains ever greater control over his various parts, and the spirit of life within gradually attains freedom. The three murderers represent the laws of the inferior world, birth, growth, and decay, which ever frustrate the plans of the builder. To the average individual, physical birth actually signifies the death of Hiram, and physical death the resurrection of Hiram. To the initiate, however, the resurrection of the spiritual nature is accomplished without the intervention of physical death. The curious symbols found in the base of Cleopatra's Needle is now standing in Central Park, New York, were interpreted as being of the first Masonic significance by S.A. Zola, 33-degree past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Egypt. Masons' marks and symbols are to be found on the stones of numerous public buildings, not only in England and on the continent, but also in Asia. In his Indians, Masons' Marks of the Mughal Dynasty, A. Gorham describes scores of markings appearing on the walls of buildings such as the Taj Mahal, the Jama Masjid, and that famous Masonic structure, the Qutb Minar. According to those who regard Masonry as an outgrowth of the secret society of architects and builders, which for thousands of years formed a caste of master craftsmen, Hiram Abiff was the Tyrian Grand Master of a worldwide organization of artisans with headquarters in Tyre. Their philosophy consisted of incorporating into the measurements and ornamentation of temples, palaces, mausoleums, fortresses, and other public buildings their knowledge of the laws controlling the universe. Every initiated workman was given a hieroglyphic with which he marked the stones he trued to show to all posterity that he thus dedicated to the supreme architect of the universe each perfected product of his labor. Concerning Mason's marks, F. Gricky Gold writes, "It is very remarkable that these marks are to be found in all countries, in the chambers of the Great Pyramid at Giza, on the underground walls of Jerusalem, in Herculaneum, and Pompeii, on Roman walls and Grecian temples, in Hindustan, Mexico, Peru, Asia Minor, as well as on the great ruins of England, France, Germany, Scotland, Italy, Portugal, and Spain." A.C. A concise history of Freemasonry. I believe that is because they share a common ancestry. I believe that they all came from Atlantis. And that's a little bit too woo-woo for some of you. From this viewpoint, the story of Hiram may well represent the incorporation of the divine secrets of architecture into the actual parts and dimensions of earthly buildings. The 3 degrees of the craft bury the Grand Master, the Great Arcanum, in the actual structure they erect, after first having killed him with the builder's tools, by reducing the dimensionless spirit of cosmic beauty to the limitations of concrete form. These abstract ideals of architecture can be resurrected, however, by the master mason, who, by meditating upon the structure, releases therefrom the divine principles of architectonic philosophy incorporated or buried within it. Thus, the physical building is actually the tomb or embodiment of the creative ideal of which its material dimensions are but the shadow. Moreover, a Hiramic legend may be considered to embody the vicissitudes of philosophy itself. As institutions for the dissemination of ethical culture, the pagan mysteries were the architects of civilization. Their power and dignity were personified in Hiram Abiff, the master builder. But they eventually fell a victim to the onslaughts of that recurrent trio of state, church, and mob. They were desecrated by the state, jealous of their wealth and power, by the early church, fearful of their wisdom, and by the rabble, or soldiery, incited by both state and church. As Hiram, when raised from his grave, whispers the Master Mason's word, which was lost through his untimely death, so according to the tenets of philosophy, the reestablishment or resurrection of the ancient mysteries will result in the rediscovery of that secret teaching, without which civilization must continue in a state of spiritual confusion and uncertainty. I was given the word, but I was not given leave to give the word. I have not been given permission to state what it is. It is an identifier that other people who have been initiated in will have, or else they were not initiated. And so it is for us to identify each other in particular. And in part, it is a secret. And some secrets cannot be revealed to the profane. And that is just a fact. I will give away every single piece of knowledge that I have been given permission to give away. That particular one I have to hold on to. And it's not so much a sworn to secrecy as a passcode. When the mob governs, man is ruled by ignorance. When the church governs, he is ruled by superstition. When the state governs, he is ruled by fear. Before men can live together in harmony and understanding, ignorance must be transmuted into wisdom, superstition into an illumined faith, and fear into love. Despite statements to the contrary, Masonry is a religion seeking to unite God and man by elevating its initiates to that level of consciousness whereupon they can behold the clarified vision of the workings of the great architect of the universe. From age to age, the vision of a perfect civilization is preserved as the ideal for mankind. In the midst of that civilization shall stand a mighty university, wherein both the sacred and secular sciences concerning the mysteries of life will be freely taught to all who assume the philosophic life. That is literally the goal of this channel, if you do not know. It really is. Like, that is what I am doing with my life. So, here, creed and dogma will have no place. The superficial will be removed, and only the essential will be preserved. The world will be ruled by its most illumined minds, and each will occupy the position for which he is most admirably fitted. The great university will be divided into grades, admission to which will be through preliminary tests or initiations. Here, mankind will be instructed in the most sacred, the most secret, and the most enduring of all mysteries. Symbolism. That's not true. That's not the most sacred. It might be the most secret and the most enduring, but it is not the most sacred. Here, the initiate will be taught that every visible object, every abstract thought, every emotional reaction is but the symbol of an eternal principle. Okay, possibly. Here, mankind will learn that Hiram, truth, lies buried in every atom of cosmos, that every form is a symbol, and every symbol the tomb of an eternal verity. Through education, spiritual, mental, moral, and physical, man will learn to release living truths from their lifeless coverings. The perfect government of the earth must be patterned, eventually, after the divine government by which the universe is ordered. In that day, when perfect order is reestablished, with peace universal and good triumphant, men will no longer seek for happiness, for they shall find it welling up within themselves. Dead hopes, dead aspirations, dead virtues shall rise from their graves, and the spirit of beauty and goodness, repeatedly slain by ignorant men, shall again be the master of work. Then shall sages sit upon the seats of the mighty, and the gods walk with men. And so ends the Hiramic legend. There was a lot in here to dissect. I am positive that I have stepped on toes, and I want you to know that it is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. I am here trying to do this. Right? What they have, this secret order and all these initiations and shit, I am doing it openly in the public. There will be a school. That is the goal of my life. That is where I am pointed with all of my endeavors. All of the things that I am doing on the earth are pointed towards the school to help dispense truth and knowledge. Part of that is teaching people math, right? Teaching people how to budget, teaching people how to write a business plan, teaching people the practical things that they missed in school. I'm not going to say they weren't taught them, but our culture in school is not one of learning. It has not been, at least in my lifetime. It's probably due in part to the Department of Education. I want to correct that. Now, I am looking to educate grown people because I don't want to be responsible for other people's children. I want grown people who are coming seeking actual knowledge. And that's what my school will be centered around. You will be taught a trade, a craft. You will be shown the way to want it in a way that will allow you to be the best at it. And we will have all of the best at it. Right? We are going to teach people to be the best, whatever, whoever you are. I want you to want to be the best. But part of the school will also be these things. We're going to teach people prayer and meditation. We will teach people how to practically manifest in their life, how to use their stack, how to identify their own problems in their own head and use that to get their stack functioning. And hopefully we allow some other people to discover that word. I really, it's not up to me. If it was up to me, I would dispense the word. But the word by itself does not have the power that is ascribed to it. You're missing a piece, so you don't get the answer. And it really is that simple. If you've got a whole puzzle and you put it all together except for one piece and that piece is missing, you have an incomplete puzzle. It doesn't matter that every other piece fits perfectly. You're missing the one thing that completes the whole thing. And this is missing a full half of the pieces. It's great to get control over the material, and that does help you in some small part get control over the spiritual. But you have to be intentional in using the spiritual in order to grow. You have to be intentional in using the powers of grounding and the powers of energizing, Boaz and Jachin. Because if you're not, then you're only doing half of it. If you are only pulling the energy up one way, you are only doing half of the exercise. And you will not get the result because you are missing the piece. It is that simple and it is that complicated. Most people think that they have the full story. Most people are perfectly content walking around life with not the whole story. They believe they have it. And even in most cases, that is enough. If you honestly, earnestly believe in the religion in which you were brought up and you seek to uphold it with the divine mandate of God, which is love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself, shed no blood of man, all of those things. If you are doing that, then you're going to be fine. And it doesn't matter if you call on the name of Jehovah, if you call on the name of Allah, or if you call on the name of Christ. It doesn't matter whose name you call on. It really doesn't. Like, God wants you to turn to Him because that is the simplest matter. That straight line is so easy. When you start having to take turns around another person or a specific name or a specific word or a specific practice, it's wrong. Those things are tools. Names are tools. And they are powerful tools. Don't get it twisted. The things that you speak hold power in a very real way. The things that you call things, that's real. But it's not the whole story. The tools are great. I have a grounding stone right here. You can see it. It's a mixture of other stones. It is one of the 1 and 8 stones. If you don't know what that is, look at the crystal video. It is a stone of no particular crystalline structure. It is for grounding. But I have another one for energizing. It also is no particular crystal structure. But this is the opposite energy. It is for energizing. There is a reason why I have the two tools. And the thing is, neither one of these things do anything of themselves. It is me manipulating the powers that God has given us, using both the creative and the grounding, using both of those together. I can do things. I have healed myself in a very real way. We talk about it a lot because it is fucking true. I have changed things in my life. I have physically manifested healing in my own life. That is a real thing. And I can't convince you of it. All I can do is tell you. I'm not here to even argue to convince you. I am merely here to tell you things that I know to be true. I'm not here to shit on Masonry. That's a great club. Y'all go have fun in your little secret club. Drink your beers, perform your little rituals, and have no clue what they actually mean. Some of you do. Some of you are actually attempting to do the things that this is, but most of them aren't. For most Masons, it is just a social club. It is just a way to associate with other people. They don't even uphold their own ideals. It's the same with religion. You have a few honestly, earnestly seeking, and then you have a vast majority that really are just there for the group. The group does not hold the answers. It doesn't matter what group it is. You can find all of the answers completely independent of the group. What I am doing here is giving answers. As many as I can possibly give that I have been given leave to give. I'm telling you about energy manipulation because it is real. I tell you about my beliefs in God because I believe they are real. You don't have to. It is whatever. I am created for a very specific purpose. And that is to cast light in the places where the darkness reigns. To bring the other half of the puzzle to the people. That's literally what I'm trying to do. I am trying to dispense as much as this is possible. There are safeguards that you need to take. They're involved. They're in these playlists, right? You can go through and watch the playlist, and you can do things that will affect your life. You need to be very careful. Do things in order. Take your time. Understand what you are doing and why you are doing it. Understand your motivations more than anything. Invest your energy intentionally, no matter where it's going. The words coming out of your mouth is investing your energy. The actions that you perform is investing your energy. It is creating the things that you are pulling into your life. And make sure that they are aligned where you want them to be. I'm not even here to tell you where to put them. I am here to tell you that it is possible. I am here to tell you that you need to be careful because you can do things that will hurt you by doing the things that I talk about. If you don't follow the 8 laws of creation, there will be repercussions. You probably are going to try that. You are probably going to do it, and you will probably feel the repercussions. I'm here to warn you, not to make you. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand that I have some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I am relaying those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. I am merely here to relay information, and if that hurts your feelings, too bad. If you are held up in your beliefs so much that it hurts your fee-fees that I am talking about anything that I talked about today, you're on the wrong channel anyway. You're not truly searching for the truth. If you have watched this far along, you probably are, and you're not got your feelings hurt. Those people left. I am open to everyone. I want every single person on the planet to pick up this information and do the correct thing with it. But it's not going to happen. Most people will never watch this. These videos, eventually they will pick up steam. Eventually they will take off. But for the most part, they are going to run under the radar. People are not going to click on the Hiram legend. They're just not going to do it. And the ones that do are going to be like, what the fuck is this? What is this guy talking about in the middle of this? I know what I'm talking about. I do not deceive. I am not bringing you down the wrong road, despite what the control systems may have told you. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. If it remains respectful, it gets to stay up. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks because I am not a communist. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.